Welcome back to another edition of the Smart Driving Cars podcast. We appreciate you being with us. This edition is sponsored by the Smart ETF's Smart Transportation and Technology ETF, symbol MOTO. For more information, head to motoetf.com. I'm Fred Fishkin, along with the Faculty Chair of Autonomous Vehicle Engineering at Princeton University, Alan Kornhauser. Hi, Alan.
Hey, good morning, Fred.
Good morning. Our guest, transportation expert, consultant, and publisher of The Dispatcher, Michael Sena. Great to see you again, Michael.
Great to be here again, Fred.
The June edition of The Dispatcher has arrived, bearing the headline, "The Future of Mobility is Slowly Coming into Focus." Give us the overview, Michael.
Well, the overview is mobility is like a shoe. There is no one size that fits all. It hasn't seemed to dawn on people who write articles for publications like Wired, the New York Times, or even The Economist, that not everyone lives in San Francisco, Brooklyn, or London. So what I tried to do in this article is to look at what are the mobility needs of people who actually live in different places. Yes, there are lots of people who live in big cities like San Francisco, Brooklyn, and London, or Shanghai or Paris, but that's not everybody. The whole idea that everyone was moving out of wherever they were before and moving into the center of these cities was a myth. It was never really happening. But people like to talk about this as if it was occurring because it fit a narrative that seemed to be building, a narrative that venture capitalists like, and that we're being fed into by folks who said, well, people are not going to need cars. People are going to, those cars that we're going to build are just going to be used when people need them. Everybody's going to be sharing cars, and mobility as a service was the future. That's fine if you live in the middle of Manhattan, if you live in the middle of London. I lived in the middle of London for a year. I didn't need a car. The last thing I needed was a car. I've lived in the middle of Stockholm during a 2-year period. I didn't need a car. I lived in Cambridge, Massachusetts for 11 years. I did need a car. I know people who lived in the middle of Boston. They needed a car too. They didn't need it every day, but they needed a car to do all the things that they wanted to do outside of getting to work and getting home. So the basic idea of this article was, the reason I say that the future of mobility is coming into focus is that it's not one focus. It's not one type of mobility that's going to substitute electric scooters for cars, or driverless cars used as taxis for buses. The appropriate mobility is what is needed in the particular locations, and those locations are basically three. There's the big cities, which are relatively few, even though they take a lot of people, they're relatively few, and I give the numbers in the article. There are small to medium-sized cities, and there I bring up my old hometown, Scranton, but also bring in Trenton, because that comes in the example of what we discussed during the Smart Driving Cars Summit. And many of the other cities that are up to maybe 150,000, 200,000, where a large number of people live, and the needs in those cities are very different from the needs in big cities like Stockholm or London or Paris. And then there's the whole rest of the world, where people live to work in farms, or people live to work in mines. They live in places which are not cities, even small cities. They may be villages, or they may be even outside of villages. And the mobility needs of these different types of locations are extremely different. The likelihood of buying an electric car in the middle of Siberia, or buying an electric car in the middle of Idaho, versus having an electric car in the middle of a small city like Trenton, versus having an electric car in the middle of Manhattan. If you don't have a parking place in Manhattan, I don't know how you deal with an electric car in the middle of Manhattan. I don't know what you would do with an electric car in the middle of Manhattan. In Stockholm, they're proposing now that some of us remember that there were parking meters. Put a quarter in. At first, you put a nickel in, then you put a quarter in, and you could park there. And it was really nice because you knew how long it was going to last, and you didn't have to worry about having a mobile phone and all this other crap. Now they've taken them all away, and now they want to replace them and use them to plug your car in. So not only do you have the stand again, but now you've got a cable that's running from this thing into your car. I mean, it's mind-boggling to think about this. So what I've tried to do here is to give enough space for each one of these different types of locations and identify what are the most important things for the people who are living there, and how does that translate into the kind of car, the kind of vehicle that they need, whether it's a car or something else, and to try to instead of saying mobility as a service, electric scooters, battery electric vehicles, that's for everybody, that's the future, and that's the end of the story, especially from politicians now, to saying, think about who's actually using it, what are the issues that each of these people have to address, how are they going to get to work, what are they going to do, and let's take it from there.
You've got an old-fashioned phone, Michael.
No, I haven't. I have an old-fashioned ringtone.
One of the things that you talk about here, Michael, is the impact of the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And I guess one question, you can tell us about that, but then the question is this a blip or is it a shift?
What's good about what's happened now is that it's put in focus something that was happening already. There was this idea that everyone was moving to the city was already out of date. I mean, people were moving into cities, but they weren't moving into central Manhattan. They weren't moving into Beacon Hill. They weren't moving into to Chelsea. They were moving into places where they were displacing the people who were living there, who had lower rents. They could move into these locations. They gentrified. So South Boston, which was a place where working class people lived, has been gentrified. People have moved into South Boston, and the people who are living there, they can't move to another part of Boston. They can't even move to Somerville or Belmont. Those places are too expensive. So what are they doing? They're moving out, farther out, into the places like Worcester, where there still are locations where they can, or Framingham, places where there still are lower rents, or they're moving to Scranton, or they're moving to Trenton, because they at least can find some sort of a decent job and some place where they can live, whether it's subsidized housing or not subsidized housing. So that trend wasn't occurring. And now what's happened is that a lot of the people who moved in there said, we'd really like to have a little place where we can, grill our hot dogs when we have to be stuck here for the next pandemic. And I mean, this is, I'm not making this stuff up. I mean, it's every day I'm reading about people in the newspapers here saying that people are moving into where we're now living. Where they're moving into where we have been living for the last 10 years, because we couldn't afford to move into the center of Stockholm, and we didn't want to move there anyway. But it was very expensive, and so the idea that everyone's moving into the center, well, maybe they are in China, because if the alternatives aren't too great. But even there, the idea of the difficulties that people have of getting medical support and all kinds of things, if they leave their hometown, is extremely difficult for people who are displaced just because they need a place to work. So it's highlighted the fact that this was never a overall trend, and now it's being reversed. One thing I want to point out, and I couldn't put this in the article because it's really real news, fresh news. In the very north of Sweden, now we're talking about the polar circle, the polar circle,
Arctic Circle.
The Arctic Circle. there are three types of businesses that are moving up there. And one of them is Northvolt, which is making batteries. And the reasons that they're moving up there is because of cheap electricity. And that's primarily, at this point, it's wind and hydroelectric electricity. The other one is a steel company. It's Sweden's largest steel company. They're setting up a test facility to make steel using electricity, not using coal. This is big because, people like to think that there's no coal in Sweden. There's lots of coal in Sweden because Sweden is a steelmaking location. And Alan from Pittsburgh knows exactly what I'm talking about. And then the third company is a company making hydrogen, generating hydrogen, which will be used in the electricity processes, but it will also be used as an alternative to battery electric vehicles. There are about 100,000 jobs and apartments and houses that are needed up in this place after people for many, many years were being supported for living in Boston. Now they're talking about giving support for people moving up. Talk about the sticks. In fact, this is beyond the sticks. It's tundra. There are no trees up in places like this because it's so far north. And people are moving there because, there are jobs there. And it's going to be a new way of life for a lot of people, not for those who are still there, who've guaranteed the borders are safe against all those bad people coming from the other countries, who stuck it out up there. Now there are people moving there, and I think this kind of thing the pandemic is just going has already begun to have an effect on people making moving decisions, which will affect how we think about mobility as a service and all this other stuff that people have been talking about loosely for the last several years.
Yeah, well, Michael, I think we know that a lot of migration, certainly the whole industrial revolution part, had to deal with where is cheap energy. Okay, why? Because maybe at one point the cheap energy was right here and so on with people, but of course now you give them machines that can leverage this. But you still need the people. Now the machines need to be fed. What feeds the machines is energy. I mean, why did, in some sense, why was Scranton there in the first place? Because it had cheap energy. Why was Paterson, New Jersey there? Because they had a waterfall. Yeah, cheap energy. Why did all these, plants, and so energy was one. The other one is, of course, the availability of transportation. Why are there so many cities along waterways? Why? Cheap transportation, and you only went so far up a river such that you didn't have to build the canals and so on, and to be able to then negotiate the grade. You went as far as you could take the ship, and that's where you locate it. So I mean, this will continue on. It will continue on. I mean, in the future, not everybody's going to be able to sit in front of a keyboard and and do all those of us that sit in front of the keyboard. Why is Goldman Sachs going to have anybody on Wall Street? I mean, really? What do you need the people on Wall Street for? I mean, everything, isn't everything done with this and with this and with this? Really, I now have to commute from Scarsdale on the whatever or from Princeton to go to, I mean, are those people, what's going to happen to those, the whole, smart city concept of, hey, we need downtown Shanghai's all over the place, or all the towers that China built, or okay, sure, you put some of those around the high-speed rail stations that you have. Okay, yeah, okay, but is that really the efficient way to locate people? Because you can have a choo-choo run between just a few points and move the masses. Is that really where people want to live, or do they want to live in the villages, or should China be looking at, what the heck do we do to improve the communes? Maybe the communes and the villages is actually a pretty darn good place for people to live. or can't you do the mobility up? But maybe you can do the mobility piece in the villages and provide enough of the services there. Certainly, certainly nice to live in Scranton. Okay.
Yeah, it is.
It was nice to live in Crafton, the first suburb outside of Pittsburgh, I mean, certainly wasn't the western section of Princeton, but, I enjoyed it. I mean, I was happy to be there.
Michael, will you have a suggestion in the dispatcher, which some may find amusing, so some not, that major publications be required to hire journalists who aren't living in the big cities, and that those journalists try to get by without vehicles, without a car, to experience public transportation systems? That it would open their minds, I guess, is the idea.
There's one of my favorite writers in the Economist, Bartleby. He's in the business section. When a few weeks after London, people stopped going into their work, he wrote a piece, and I've kept it, and I actually did write something back to him, but I never sent it to him because it's just, you get into these cycles, and they either they don't write back to you, or they write back something which there was no reason for me to do it. But basically, he said, everyone's now going to work from home. Oh, really? Gosh, who's driving that bus that's still running? All those people who are working in the hospitals, how do you think they get to work? The people who are taking care of everybody that now has COVID-19, the doctors, and it's not just them, it's the people who are cleaning the toilets. It's people who are keeping the electricity running. It's people who are making sure that the computers are still, it's a large number of people when it comes down to it. And essential workers, there are an awful lot of essential workers. Every restaurant, every store, all of the things, all of the people, those books that were coming from Amazon and all these other places, people were putting them into packages. Somebody was actually driving a car or a van to deliver that package to you. And you got your food delivered to you yesterday, whatever. And all of these people were out there working. And he says, everyone's going to work from home. So yes, get on your bike and go someplace where people actually live and they have to do work, rather than sitting in your apartment and wherever you are, Mr. Bartleby, in London, and thinking that you're never going to go to work again.
Yeah, I mean, look, if a ditch needs to be dug, it's pretty hard to do it from here, I mean,
there's no such thing as virtual ditch digging.
There's no virtual ditch digging. If some fruit need to be picked, if my air conditioning needs to be fixed, I mean, there are of course a substantial number of folks. There are also all a bunch of us who are out. I mean, although some might think that we can teach online because we did it over this past 15 months or whatever. I'm telling you, at one point I thought that some of these teaching online stuff was really going to, and the University of Phoenixes of this world were going to supplant Princeton, because it could give you a Princeton education for 2 or 3 orders of magnitude less.
Yeah.
I mean really less, because of course there's the scale and all that stuff, and the do and the rip it. And I'm telling you, my experience with it, I was nowhere near as good of a teacher on this thing as at least I think I am in the damn classroom. And
aren't there people in other professions who may feel the same way? Bring this up for you too, Michael, who maybe do work in the office settings typically until the pandemic, who are anxious to get back because they feel that whether it's the office banter or whatever, or in-person meetings are different than
Well,
doing it all online.
I'll bring it to what I normally work with, and that's automobiles. You know, if you think that you can develop and deliver a car remotely, you've never worked in the automobile industry. Even if you are not working and putting, screwing the things in and putting the electric cables in and doing all of the stuff, the physical stuff. A car is a physical object, but all the work that needs to be done in order to deliver a car, whether it's a new car or whether it's a revised version of an older car. For the last year, I haven't been to the place where this is all happening, even though I've been part of delivering a new car. And I can see, and I did write about this a couple of issues ago, I can see the huge difference between what you can do remotely and what you can't do remotely. And I think, even for Goldman Sachs, the people who are working in the investment business, there's only so much you can do like this. You can have these kinds of meetings, you can discuss these things, but if you're doing a deal, you need to have side discussions, and you need to be able to look people in the eye and say, and get them all in one place and do what you need to do, whether it's drawing or writing or whatever it is, diagramming, and not being able to do that, not having the capability of doing that, of having all of the people eyeball to eyeball and saying, now we have to get this done. It's just not possible to do it virtually. And
Yeah.
it's not.
So
Yeah,
if people have moved to the suburbs, does that then underscore the need for the transportation needs?
Absolutely. I mean, the thing is, what I really liked about this concept of, okay, people are moving to the suburbs. Well, they're already there. If you say, well, they're moving now with a virtual life, you're able to move further away. You're able to, and if you don't have to commute 5 days a week, if you only have to commute 2 days a week, then you can spend an extra 15, 20, and even an hour extra getting into the job twice a week, as opposed to doing it 5 days a week. And I think that kind of flexibility does work. I don't need to be there 5 days a week, but I sure do need to be there 2 or 3 days a week to do the kinds of things that I need to do. A nephew of mine works at the National Institutes of Health. From the day he started 10 years ago, 15 years ago, he's worked at home on every Friday. From the day he started, this is nothing new. During the pandemic, he's been at home 5 days. So he hasn't gone into the office in a year. He's starting to go back now. But there's certain things that you can do. But he's an industrial engineer overseeing people doing industrial processes, including developing the COVID-19. Now, it's a liability not being able to sit with people and do work together. But it doesn't mean that you have to do it 5 days a week, and doesn't mean you have to commute 5 days a week. So the kind of flexibility that you have in being able to do certain kinds of work at home versus doing certain kinds of work together with people. For the last 50 years, it hasn't been in the middle of the city. IBM has moved out of New York City a long, long time ago.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's part of the important thing. It isn't all, at Wall Street, and in fact, all the back office stuff of all that stuff is all, on the Jersey side. And if you go to Jersey City and so on, it's getting to look like Manhattan. So there's a lot there, and of course, then maybe what we need is some additional coordination on how we work, so that we can be together when we need to be together, and you don't have to have everybody together at that same point. And in fact, the opportunities now for let's call them suburban office developments, where now there's a place that you can go to. Goldman Sachs would have an office here in Princeton, or somewhere near Princeton, that the people here go to maybe 2 days a week. They go into Manhattan 1 day a week. They and and then the other 2 days a week, they can almost be at home. So of course, now that, the multiple opportunities, at least for the folks in which most of the work or a substantial amount of work is done on here. Okay. People people have done that and so on, hey, even at ALK, what they end up doing, network coding and all the network data update, what they do, they actually ship that off to India to do it. And for a while we were doing it in Russia. Why? Because again, part of the production work that was, where the labor was, where people could do it, were in their locale. You did it there instead of bringing him into the assembly line, bringing him into the ditch that you had to dig, or bringing him into the, house that you were building. There's certainly those fundamental differences in terms of where you work. And then, of course, you need transportation, and our discussion here is usually or mostly about transportation, but it is about living. You go to places for more than just getting the resources so that you can feed your family. You have to go get the food. You also have some other activities that you like to do in your life, and so you really need mobility or opportunities to go to those things. And to me, that's part of also the thought that if we're going to put the mobility out there or encourage the mobility to be out there, we should be encouraging mobility that is, of course, as we discuss, affordable, which is kind of really important, because then people can take advantage of it. Now, how do you make something affordable? Well, you can have a sugar daddy come in and pick up the tab. Okay, great, wonderful. That may be a tough thing, or it could be affordable from the get-go. Why does it have to be expensive? Okay, and it's not that it's, if it's expensive, it's better. I don't know, maybe. Okay, I have to have my my Patek Philippe. See my Patek Philippe, whatever. I don't know.
Oh, you Casio.
Okay.
Yeah, Casio.
I have no. I used to go down the Canal Street in New York, and
company called Wise makes this one.
Yeah.
WYZE. $20.
Yeah. No. Oh yeah. I went to the Pearl store in Beijing, and I got myself an Apple Watch, a real one that looked exactly like the gold 17,000 or whatever dollar one, whatever. And I'm sitting in one of these whatever restaurants in Princeton with my fake one, and somebody's looking at me like, hey, he's got a real one of them. He's got one of them. I'm there.
You could have offered to sell it, Alan.
No, I've never been able to sell anything, so I'm not good at that one. So, but I mean, if you show up in a pretentious Princeton restaurant, that's what happens, whatever.
We'll be back with more, but first, this is a good time to remind you about our sponsor, the Smart ETF's Smart Transportation and Technology ETF, symbol MOTO. To get more information, head to motoetf.com. On the website, look for the white paper. It's called the Smart Transportation Revolution. You can find it under the Insights and News tab. Some great information there to help you make informed decisions about where you put your money. And you may know that ETFs can be a smart way to spread risk with investments and focus on a particular category of stocks. The site, once again, is motoetf.com. We're back with more of the Smart Driving Cars podcast and our guest, Michael Sena. Michael, there's another story in the June edition of the Dispatcher headlined, "Better Batteries Are on the Way," and you talk about a Denver-based company, Solid Power.
Yeah, solid-state batteries. I need to pair that article with the article that comes after after the article. So the first one is better batteries are on the way, and talk about solid state batteries as opposed to lithium ion batteries, which are solid state as opposed to having a liquid type core, gel type core, and the advantages of solid state versus the current design for lithium ion. They're give greater range. They are lighter, and also they are much less prone to blow up. And that's the second article, which follows the first one on solid state batteries, where I discussed the whole issue of primarily Teslas having an accident and turning into an inferno. So with the people inside, or if they're able to get the people out, but the car ends up looking like the photographs that I've put in the dispatcher. Personally, I would not buy an electric car today, knowing what I know about the state of batteries. That to me is a major problem. Yes, cars can blow up too, with gasoline and so on, but I don't think that we really have come to grips with the whole issue of the dangerous nature of batteries, particularly in battery electric vehicles. I think that solid state batteries give us a better potential. I think that we have dangerous situations with all cars, but the fact that when you look at one of these cars, that they can't put the fire out because it continues to burn and burn and burn. If you're in the car and this is happening and you can't get out, there's no chance for you. So I think that if we can produce safer batteries, the possibility of having a wider spread of battery electric vehicles, if we can produce batteries that have a greater range, it gives the possibility of having more electric vehicles. It's only positive. But I think the situation that we're in right now, where we don't really know how safe or how dangerous these cars are, is problematical. It's troublesome to me that the governments have allowed this to occur without having any. Seems like even in Europe, very little control over the possibility that these cars have dangerous battery situations.
Well, this company has both BMW and Ford as partners.
Yeah. I think that Ford. We can have a long discussion about what Ford seems to have found its message. It's I don't know whether it's a change in tune or something, the new CEO, but they seem to have found their message, and the message that everything is battery electric vehicles. I mean, everything that they're doing. Before, it was, we're going to stop building sedans. We're going to concentrate on SUVs. That was a year ago. Now everything they're doing is it's battery electric vehicles. BMW has been much more consistent, and the fact that they invested in Northvolt, that's the company, the Swedish company that's making batteries, to be able to have batteries that are produced in Europe as opposed to all the batteries being produced in China. And they've said that we're investing in this technology because it gives us better range, it's safer, and it's lighter. Those are the three things that we think are important. And for me, the safety part of it is even more important than the range and the weight. Yeah, and I expect more companies to be investing in solid state technology, or in combination with other technology, not just battery electric vehicles. And if you look at lithium ion batteries, and I've tried to point this out in the article. Look at the components of these. They're expensive. Much of what is needed to put into these batteries comes from single places, very few locations, and it's very expensive. So yeah, you say, well, we're going to scale up and then we'll be able to reuse the batteries, but that's going to take an awful long time to do that. And in the meantime, you're pushing people into technology which may not be as safe as some people would like it to believe that it is.
Well, batteries have always been sort of the Achilles heel of this whole thing. I mean,
Yeah.
you can go all the way back to 1837 or something like that, when people first started trying to play with batteries and,
Mhm.
into a train type, toy train type things. I mean, it's been the tough piece. And I sort of say to the students that if computers had advanced at the rate that batteries have advanced, we would be we would be. I mean,
Where did I put that floppy disk?
Yeah.
I mean, it's even worse than that. So, I mean, batteries have been really tough. And I also sort of throw out there, it's not because extremely bright people haven't tried to do something about it. Edison, I mean, wanted to do batteries better. Batteries have been really tough. Now,
Mhm.
who knows what the breakthrough is going to be? Who knows who the Bill Gates is going to be of batteries, or the thing, the entity that kind of breaks it open. The solid state have made some progress, but as you point out, I mean, there's still some very heavy lifting there to do, fundamentally heavy lifting to do to have batteries. They need to improve several orders of magnitude. They need a Moore's law, you know, to really make this. And if they do, then it's great. But it's the weight, it's the how what are the source materials, it's the size, it's all those things. And you look at the Boeing and what it had to go through with batteries in the Dreamliner. How long was that delayed because of the fear of fire coming out of
Yeah.
those batteries. and
Yes,
and and
exactly.
this is not new. This is and it is, but we absolutely have to deal with it. And I throw out, with respect to the Tesla stuff, first of all, if their automated emergency braking system had worked, the car would never hit the tree. Okay, so all right, get that sucker to work, but the
Mhm.
car hit the tree. Okay, now holy
Yeah.
hell, now the battery comes into play, and damn it, you got to do, if you're going to let it hit the tree, then you better deal with a battery. Okay, so in some sense, at least do one of those things.
Yeah.
Preferably get the braking system to work.
Well, both of them. I mean, no, let's deal with. I mean, there's
Right.
not that we don't have stuff to do. Okay, we
Right.
have stuff to do.
Well, some other headlines to touch on, Alan and Michael. May Mobility is beginning autonomous shuttle service in Indianapolis in June, a couple days away, with the vehicles having an attendant, they say, to explain the technology and make passengers feel safe. That's going
Yeah,
on in a
yeah.
lot of
Well,
places.
look. I mean, that has to. We have to deal with the sociology of this stuff. And we're assuming that the technology works. But just the technology working is not enough for this. Okay, we I don't know how Henry Ford got people to accept the Model T, and get people to buy them, and actually go out and trust them, and so on and so forth. I don't know, maybe he got a federal grant in infrastructure or something that allowed him to do that, or whatever,
No,
or he
no,
sold the
no.
hell out of it, or whatever, or made it so damn affordable that, of course, they were flying off the shelves.
Well,
um,
yeah, they were actually, compared to the numbers that were being put up in other places. And when in the 20s, when it got going in the United States with inexpensive cars, and they hadn't quite figured out how to make inexpensive cars in Europe at the time or anyplace else, the difference in the number of cars that were being sold was enormous. And I've told the story. My grandfather bought, it wasn't a Model T, it was a Model A, and he bought that car for political reasons. I don't want to go into this story too much, but he had two brothers-in-law who lived on the same street, and the three of them got into his Model A every day, and they went to the mine and worked and came home. It meant that it was about a 5 to 7 mile drive in the car, but it meant they didn't have to take the trolley line down. And the trolley line in those days, in the 30s, middle to late 30s, the trolley lines were filled with spies, and the spies were from Mussolini's crew, and they kept their eyes on what was going on with all the Italians, all the Italian Americans. You laugh about this, but I've read the stories, and this was not funny. You know, they were trying.
I don't mean it.
My uncle, when he turned 18, was drafted. I mean, he had lived in the United States since he was 6 years old. But when he turned 18, he was drafted into the Italian army.
I was drafted into the French army. Okay, I didn't go.
Yeah, well, he didn't go either, and he didn't go back to Italy until
I was not going to Algeria. Are you joking? I mean, I wasn't going to Vietnam, let alone go to Algeria. Oh,
but you want to talk about reasons for buying cars. I mean, there are lots of reasons for buying cars, not only just getting to and from work or getting to and from church.
Yeah.
No. Another story. Reuters reports that I'm not sure how to pronounce this. Sberbank, the biggest lender in Russia, has developed a fully self-driving vehicle that they called Flip. Might want to rethink that name, which it describes as a taxi of the future.
Maybe they should call it Nova. You know, I mean, there's a name. Right. Sell that in Mexico. Whatever. Never mind.
So the work is going on in Russia as well, of course.
Well, great. No, I mean we need a lot of industrialists and ingenious people trying to do that. We don't.
One interesting thing, as per what Michael was talking about, they're saying replaceable batteries will power the vehicle's electric motor, but it can also harness the power of alternative fuels like natural gas and hydrogen. Mm-hmm. Same vehicle. Interesting.
Oh, no, that's very interesting. I mean, it's one thing to say I can turn my diesel from a petroleum diesel into a biodiesel, and suddenly they've got no emissions from the fuel. But to say that I can either run my car with
a replaceable
battery, you know, and okay, well,
whatever. I mean, maybe it's like the Volt, you know, it has a little, a lot of stuff appears out there in the Sunday supplements that, you know, where the folks pay for the placement in the news thing. Not to suggest that that's what happened here. Never mind.
Well, Wired has a report that says when driving is partially automated, people drive more. It says a study finds that users of advanced driver assistance systems drive nearly 5,000 more miles per year than similar drivers without the technology. Surprising?
No.
When I saw that, when you mentioned that, Fred, I thought, well, I've got to find the study. And the guy who wrote this, the Wired guy who wrote this from his office someplace in Silicon Valley or somewhere in San Francisco, I really would like to see what this means. If there's a direct connection between buying a car with advanced driver assistance systems and the amount of driving that you do. I find it difficult to make that connection, but who knows? I'm going to look for the article. I haven't seen it.
Well, Alan, if you took that cruise control away from Alan, he might not be driving.
I believe this statement. Okay, the people who have these gizmos drive more, and maybe drive 5,000 miles more than the people that don't. for two reasons. One is, if I drive that much, I go out and buy this stuff. Therefore, I get counted as a person who drives a lot. And I'm no longer counted as a person that drives a lot without this stuff, because I don't have, I left them without this stuff. What's
Sure.
left over and without this stuff are people that don't drive. Okay. So of course the numbers are going to come out this way. One. Number two, it's probably not 5,000 miles worth, but I like to say the only reason you go someplace is to improve your utility, your quality of life. Otherwise, you wouldn't have. You would have stayed where you are. I mean, that's the economic argument on the thing, okay? So I go someplace, I'm going to be better off. I choose that. I want to go there because apparently that's the best thing that I want to do at that point in time. Otherwise, I would have stayed where I was. I mean, I'm not stupid. I'm rational in my own rationality. I'm not rational in Michael's rationality. Of course not. I mean, he gets to have his own. I'm rational in mine. How else do I choose things? Okay. For something, it's my net utility improvement of being out there. Part of that is the joy of getting there, being there, whatever that, praying in a synagogue. Okay. All right. But that's diluted by the pain in the butt associated with getting there. Okay. So if all of a sudden the pain in the butt associated with me getting there is less because I have gizmos on the car, then to end up praying in a synagogue, it's not going to have to be as good as it would have had to be if it had also not only be fundamentally good, but also make up for the pain in the butt to get there. Okay, the disutility associated with getting there. So all of a sudden, if I have something, which is a whole argument about having, affordable, cheap, and so on transportation, it makes things that otherwise you wouldn't have taken advantage of to improve your utility, you go take advantage of them. Okay. So therefore it's going to, by natural. I mean, if it didn't do that, some of the fundamental economics of transportation wouldn't exist. I mean, why do you want to make it cheaper? So you have a greater range of marketplaces that you can go to and so on and so forth. Here, these gizmos, they do make at least to me, in my mind, they make driving easier. They make driving less of a pain in the butt. They really reduce the cost, the generalized cost of mobility. So therefore, because of that, then of course I'm going to use it more. But 5,000 miles more?
Yeah, that's what, 100 miles a week?
That's a lot. Okay. But
I think you need to just turn it around and say the reason that people buy these tools, it's a tool. It helps them get the job done. As you said, you have a job you're doing.
Absolutely.
The reason you're driving is because it's you need to do a job. And,
because
driving is part of the job.
It improves you. It improves you think it's good for you.
It gives
it gives you opportunities to do things that are good for you. Yes.
If I'm a butcher, I want to have sharp tools. I don't want a dull knife. So if part of my job is getting to the airport at 4:00 in the morning, I want to make sure that I've got a car that's going to get me to the airport at 4. If that's the only way I'm going to get there.
Yeah.
And where you live, it depends on how you can take a taxi, you can take the car, whatever it is. But if you're dependent on your car to get to the airport, you want to have a car that's going to get you there with the good tires, et cetera. So if part of my job is using a tool to help me do my job, then I want a good tool. I'm not going to have a car that I can't depend on if I need to depend on getting to an airport at 4:00 in the morning to make a flight to someplace. And if I miss the flight, I miss my job, I don't have an income,
Sure.
and I'm screwed. So that's very important. I think it's I'll read the article because I think it's like, oh, I don't know.
Well, no, but I think the way you get the numbers is that when you compute it up before, what's the before situation? Before people own these things, before they owned these things, the people, they didn't have it, so therefore the average miles driven by those things was a number. That distribution, much of that had people who drove a lot. Okay, now
I'll
you
put
then
it in
take
another
it.
way. I'll put it in another way.
Yeah.
The person who's bought these tools would have driven those 5,000 miles anyway.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I agree.
So it's you're looking at the people who buy the tool, not what it's affected. So if they drove 10,000, now they bought the tool and now they drive 15,000. They don't have 15,000. They don't have an extra 5,000 miles to go someplace. They always had 15,000 miles. Now they've got a tool, and they're the ones who buy the tool in order to help them get there. Just like, so why is this article important? I don't know.
I don't. It's not. It's not important. It's not at all important. It's just they're making it important to somehow say that just because now I have a knife, I've bought the knife, I'm going to become a butcher.
I'm going to become a butcher. Right.
No, that's not what happened here. The person who bought this before, there were not sharp knives, and the butcher was like sweating all over the place. Okay, so they're all nuts. Now all of a sudden somebody designs a smart knife. Whew, man, butchers buy them. Okay,
exactly.
All right,
well,
so you count them up over here in the butcher. They're using it like hell. The other people, they weren't butchers. But before that group included some butchers. So of course you had a distribution of butchers in there. Yeah, the number, it's, you can take statistics and they can give you a lot of information. You can also take some other statistics and make some sort of point that you're trying to make, which is pointless, which is just wrong. But what the hell? Have a ball wired. I mean, it's maybe that when I should move to clickbait, and that would, I mean, it's out there with,
Well, you guys certainly had the knives out. Well, we want to thank Michael Sena once again for being here with us. The website is michaellsena.com. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you very much, Fred.
Always a pleasure, and keep those great dispatchers coming. Really, I mean, very, very, very informative, very mind stimulating, and extremely well written.
Thank you to our sponsor, the Smart ETF's Smart Transportation and Technology ETF. The ticker symbol for the ETF is MOTO, and more information is available at motoetf.com. You can find us at smartdrivingcar.com, on Anchor FM, Spotify, TuneIn, Apple, Google, Spreaker, SoundCloud, wherever you turn for podcasts. You can get your smart speaker to play us too. You can find my tech reports at techstination.com. I'm Fred Fishkin along with Alan Kornhauser. Thank you for listening or watching, and please stay safe.
And have a great Memorial Day weekend, those of you here in the US of A. The rest of the world, I don't know what you call this weekend. You probably have a 3-dayer also, because we are all in enormous need for a 3-day weekend.